Hi everyone, I'm Andres. I'm here with Maggie Rodford, which I'm sure you already know. Maggie, welcome to Barcelona.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's not your first time here, right?
No, but first time to the festival.
Okay, so welcome to the festival for the first time.
Yes,
It's amazing. I think you're going to enjoy the festival afterwards.
Yeah.
Right, that's amazing.
Looking forward to it.
And I guess a lot of people is interested in meeting you, like myself. I was so looking forward to meet you. I'm really curious to understand what's your conception behind the phrase music supervisor. What is it exactly? What is that you do?
So the title music supervisor is pretty all-encompassing. And it does have a different meaning in different media as well. So I'm always very conscious that in theatre, the music supervisor is also the music director. Mm-hmm. So is a musician and will direct the musicians, write arrangements and orchestrations, etc. That's the one part I don't do. So a music certainly the music supervisor role in the other media very much brings together all aspects of the music for the project you're working on, whether it's a film, television, games. A live experience is also very current at the moment, using music supervisors to assist. And really, we're like a department head. We're classified in the film world as being a head of department, HOD. And so depends on the project as to what facets of the music we're really closely involved with. And also, some projects don't have any source music, any commercial licensing at all, whereas others can be massively filled with commercial licenses, and there's a huge amount of administration and negotiation that goes into that. And then on the other side is the score and the commissioning of the score, recording of the score. And so my role specifically, and the way I've sort of come into the music supervision world, is I do get involved in all of those areas, which I love. And I love working in the studio with the composers, helping set up the logistics, working out the logistics, liaising with the musicians, contractors, studios, talent, negotiating key talent contracts, as well as doing the music clearance side.
Amazing. And that's something that needs a sort of peculiar background. What's your background actually? It's like music, academic music?
So music was always my main subject at school.
Okay.
And I loved everything about music. I should say played, because I'm very, very rusty, but I played piano and cello, and nice. I used to sing in choirs. And I always wanted to work in recording studios. I was very fortunate that I was accepted at the BBC to go on to what at that time was called their production assistance course. And that gave me, it was a 6-month intensive course on everything that you needed to know about admin. I do own up that it included shorthand and typing. It's so long ago. But, I don't use shorthand. But typing, keyboard skills, I use it every single day. So, wow. It's sort of kind of everything that I learnt then. And it was very much 6 months of organisational training, but all in because it was at the BBC, it was all allied to their actual content that they were producing, whether it was radio or television or whatever. And then I worked for a very short period as an assistant, and then I had an opportunity to apply, and I was successful in getting onto their music engineers training course. So I actually worked for 3.5, 4 years at the BBC as an engineer. And again, it was a fantastic intensive training course across, I was in radio, so it was across all of the radio strands that the BBC have. So that was classical, pop, drama, and speech. So learning basic skills, seeing hundreds of sessions, being involved with lots of, fantastic sessions. And actually at the time, I was still singing, and I sang in the BBC choir, which we sang a lot with the BBC Symphony Orchestra at the proms, etc., all the sort of major classical works. So it was a 5-year period, which was, I didn't know at the time. I had no idea what a music supervisor was, or even if anything like this even existed. But the only reason I left the BBC was that the head of our department was headhunted by EMI to start a programmes broadcast company for EMI to service the commercial radio world. It was slightly ahead of its time in as much as commercial radio, I think the UK had 3 or 4 stations, and they had no budgets to actually produce programmes for, or to have other people produce programmes for them, which was the model that the company had been based on, which was the American model. But it gave me an amazing chance. I produced the Everly Brothers story for the BBC, so it was the first time that BBC Radio 1 had taken a programme from outside. So it was kind of, obviously I knew all the people involved at the BBC. So I engineered and produced that. And then it also, we had our own studio facilities, but if we had larger sessions to do, we could book Abbey Road. And so I had a chance of working at Abbey Road. And the person who was the MD of Abbey Road at the time always came and said hello, made sure that I had everything I needed. I have to own up that there was a little bit of curiosity because nobody had seen a girl engineer. So people used to come and peep around the door. But again, I had the opportunity to learn an enormous amount in a very short space of time. And through the MD of Abbey Road, he came and saw me one day and he said, how's things going? And I said, I don't think us as a company are going to be existing very much longer. We've had the accountants in and they're asking me why I'm putting tape that we've edited out, because we don't need that particular take of dialogue or whatever, and they've asking me why I can't join it back up again and reuse it. And I said, it gives me a signal that I don't think we're here for the long term. And he very kindly mentioned me to colleagues at Air Studios, and Air Studios had, within the last about 7 years before that, had been started by George Martin, who had left being a staff producer at EMI and had set up the Air group of companies. And through that I met a director who was a director on the Air-Edel board, and Air-Edel had started where George Martin had met this amazing guy called Herman Edel in New York. And Herman was the bridge in New York between the advertising world and the talent within the music industry. So amongst his friends and people that he regularly worked with were people like Quincy Jones. So he was bringing sort of top-end talent to the advertising agencies and helping them put together music packages. And he and George had met at a conference. Wow. You never know what might happen. And they'd met at a conference and really hit it off. And he said to George, well, who's doing what I do here in London? And George said, well, nobody is. In fact, one of his very good friends, and at that time, I think a co-director of Air, was Roger Greenaway, who wrote Teach the World to Sing. Mm-hmm. And he said, Roger has to end up by doing his own deals and, putting the whole thing together, and he got other friends, etc. So that was the sort of starting point for Air-Edel. And so they based the company on the model that Herman had in New York, which was extremely successful, and started Air-Edel long before I was there. So I had this introduction to Air-Edel through Abbey Road, and I joined. I got offered a job as a junior producer, and I joined. So. No. Sorry, I've talked for a long time.
No, that's super exciting. I mean, you have some...
It's sort of, I think for me, everything I learned during that period, I use every single day now. Mm-hmm. So some of the technologies change, but the principles are still the same. And so for me, it's, I never knew at that point that, I certainly did not know at that point that the chance of being a music supervisor on a major film was even something that was a possibility.
Of course.
And it was just one of those things that, the music supervision world in those days really wasn't that very well developed here in Europe or in the UK. So, one thing has grown from another, so...
But in radio, cinema, television, you have to understand what's the big arc, right? What's happening. You look for emotions, images. Your research is on that, right?
And it's all about entertainment, mm-hmm. and ensuring that you're delivering the message or the musical message that's required. So.
And when do you get into the process? Really ahead of when you have the script, you talk to the director.
So nowadays, I love it when we can read a script very early on before there are no decisions. It doesn't always happen. It varies a lot. So sometimes we'll be involved very early on. We might even get a chance to have an input into what music budget they're allowing, if there's a lot of source music. That happens very occasionally, but it's always very welcomed if we can have a say in that. And really, every project is very different because it's every film has a different team of people working on it, and a director whose approach to one film will have gone in one certain direction. On another film, he or she's got a completely different idea. So really the first thing is always ideally reading the script, meeting with the director, producer, trying to understand the vision that they have, where they are in the process. In some instances, it's finding out who key casting is, because they've got to sing or play piano, or, there's a lot to sort of find out. It's a bit like... you're seeking a lot of information at the beginning, which is non-musical, but it just informs then how you can suggest moving forward. Films, as you all know, each one is so different, and the music has to have. You can't just say, "Oh, music is music is music." It's not, and music can make such a difference to a scene or to the feeling of a whole film. It's something that I think is... a lot of directors are very scared of music as well. So early on, there's a lot of... sometimes just making people feel really comfortable to talk about music, and not to try and put into musical language what they're saying, just using emotional language or everyday words. That tells you much more than somebody giving you the wrong Italian term and it sends you off in the wrong direction. So yes, every film is very different. I think the other big thing is always managing expectations in those early stages, because we all have issues with budgets, and the director that's had the writer put into the script major scenes with mega mega titles that are going to cost a lot of money. And you can send the rights holder a letter from the director pleading that, he really wants this, but he's only got X amount of money. It's not really going to make that much difference. Occasionally it does, but just managing that expectation. And, sometimes there's a genuine lack of knowledge that somebody's prepared a budget, they've not read the script, they've not seen that there's a whole number of musical moments. Regardless of what pieces of music they're choosing, they've got to be musical moments that are on camera. And then when you start breaking that down for them and saying, well, even if you're looking at X amount of money per spot, it sort of outruns the budget that you've currently got in your budget. And for me, it's always, if possible, to have those conversations as early as possible, because other departments will be also having those conversations and taking their own little bits. Yes, and I love them dearly, but the visual effects teams are very good at taking large chunks.
And you work with references when you have like an idea of, I don't know, the amount of scenes you have to, let's say, complete. You work with references, you know composers, so you get like styles of music related to the scene mood or stuff like that, or?
Yes, I mean, I think finding the right composer, again, as early as possible is always a real goal for me, because the amount, so much of music and film is, whether it's TV, film or games, is understanding what the narrative is and understanding what the director is looking for. And it's very hard to do that if a composer is brought on and is told you've got 4 weeks to do the music. You've got no time to have that conversation with the director or explore different ideas. Whereas if a composer comes on early, and the composer has to be willing to have this approach, but if they come on early, they can have that sort of getting to know you time, as I call it, where they can send a theme to a director and say, do you like this? And do you like the style? Or, do you think this might work, as something we can then adapt for different parts of the film in different ways. And you've got time to have that conversation without people thinking, if I give the wrong answer, I'm going to get fired. And which is the end of the spectrum, which unfortunately is all too common. And half of the time it's just that the composer and the director have not had enough time to get to know each other.
Yeah.
And music is last in, therefore it's first out, which is very sadly the case.
So you're really into the in between the director and the composer relationship, right? So you have to be aware that they also understand each other, they get along well, right?
Yes, I mean, different composers like working different ways. Some composers really like to, spend time with the director totally by themselves, which is absolutely fine. Other composers really appreciate if the music supervisor's there with them, and can be, if anything, just another pair of eyes and ears to make sure that they're interpreting a note in the right way. And sometimes as well, these sessions can expand, and it's not just the composer and the director, it's the producer, the editors, who can be so influential and so helpful as well. But you can end up with a room of people all who have got a little bit of an idea about this one piece of music. So for the composer to have someone else there who understands music and can then have a conversation, sometimes afterwards, and the composers will say, do you think this is what they really meant? Or do you think what I'm now working on, do you think this, meets the budget, that it meets the brief that they were looking for? So it is it's a lot to take on some of those meetings. So therefore, having that extra person there sometimes can help.
Can help
but it varies. Each project's so different, and obviously when you come to the choice of the source music side, there again, there's lots of different opinions. So being in the room and being able to discuss them firsthand or on a Zoom call with all the correct people there can be really helpful.
Amazing. And then there is something related to the big arc, as I was saying before. Is of course a structure of scenes, but also it's a musical structure, right? So when you think about, I don't know, like operas and symphonies, they have a relationship in between parts, right? In terms of keys and tonalities. Is that important for you also? Is something that you bear in mind?
Very
without
much so.
the director knowing that?
Yes. No, extremely important. And also for the composer, sometimes where a song has not been locked off, it can be very frustrating because they really want to be able to write either side of the song, but they need to know what the key, it's better for them to get the key relationship right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, things like that can be changed later, but it's always nicer. The more information you have earlier on, it makes for a more fluid situation.
Of course, make it work as a, let's say, piece of art itself, right?
Yes.
And also makes people still get entertainment.
It feels more holistic. I personally love it where, in a film where you've got source music that's been licensed, I don't want to feel that it pops out at me. I want it to feel that it's part of the whole, as you say, the arc of the film, which is including the score as well.
And if something is missing, because you work a lot with composers and original music, but also with licensed music, right?
Yes.
And you have to pick the licensed music. And how do you do that? You have a team to help you to look for the right pieces, or is something that is in your mind that is missing there?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we work in pairs, which can be really good way of doing it. Sometimes there's obvious choices. Sometimes you just know the director has always wanted this track and he's not going to even listen to anything else until you know whether the answer is whether it's affordable or not. So you have to be really open to ideas from all places as well. And then there's obviously sometimes the opportunity where you can send a brief out to the rights owners and say, this is the brief for the scene, this is what we're looking for. And it might be, we're really looking for a young upcoming artist who might be open to then taking that song and making it work, fit with the scene a little bit more. And so there's sometimes things to sort of consider on that side as well. But they all make it's all about tying the music into the film so that the two are really solid together.
In advertising, for instance, it's very common to have a director asking you for something similar to
yes.
That happens also in the film.
Well, that does, but that's such a difficult situation because obviously there's a legal perspective, but also for a composer. I mean, even in film and television, composers can find the position where they're very tied into what's called the temp dub, which is where commercially available music or other people's scores have been used to just demo the scene, so that whilst the editing is happening, the editor's got some music to work with and the director's seeing the scene as a whole with music on it. And the same thing happens in advertising. The real problem is we have a real danger of what's known as temp love. And it becomes impossible for the director to consider anything else. And then he pushes the composer to get closer and closer. And then the composer's left in the middle of having to say, well, that crosses over, that's potentially an infringement. I can't go there.
And then you are there to defend him or her?
Hopefully, yes.
You are the person who has to take that role too?
Absolutely.
It's you?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes hard and there's a lot of tension, I guess.
Yes, I mean, you again, I think it's that thing of trying to manage expectations early in the process. So you don't want things to escalate in that way. So if at all possible, you kind of see the warning signs and try and head it off before it gets into a nasty situation.
And then when it comes to copyright and all the legal aspects, you also said that you love that part too?
Yes, I do. I mean, to me, it's all part and parcel, obviously, of music supervision. And we always involve the lawyers in the final stretch on a contract, along with the legal teams, the rights holders, etc., and whoever we're delivering, whether it's a commercial or an ad agency, or whether it's a film and you're delivering to a studio. Everyone has has very specific requirements in the licenses. It can be quite challenging navigating some of them. And it can be frustrating at times, given that the process can almost grind to a halt. It just takes forever to get licenses and invoices. And meanwhile, the film, of course, you can't, the film normally, not all the time, but normally you need to have an absolute accurate duration of the cue that's been used if you're licensing music. And, we've had situations in the past where, there was a second difference or 2 seconds difference between what actually got used and what the license said. And it was because they went in to the dub at the end, they made a change and they made just a slightly slower crossfade with the next cue or something. And it gets picked up by the lawyers. And you then have to go back through the process. And it doesn't change the price necessarily, but so everything has to be pinpoint accurate. There's no, it's going to be in the region of, once you've requested the license. It's got to be so accurate and so on them. But at the point where the film has been dubbed, in the producer's mind, the film's finished. And of course, they want to get it delivered, because they then get their final payment when they get delivery. And then the music license start taking months and months.
And you suffer. And you wait.
And then you get very angry producers. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of, it's not the music supervisor's fault. It's the process. And it can be extremely frustrating. And very frustrating when you feel that you've done a really great job from the musical side.
Yeah. And then you have to confront that side of the business, but it's great that you love it, because that's very important.
Yes,
to be very patient about it.
Yeah, you do.
And because you work in different places of the world, what's the difference between Europe and US in those aspects? Like, you think that US is more agile when it comes to all the legal aspects, or is any difference between markets?
It varies from company to company.
From companies more than culturally.
Yeah, yes, I think it's very hard to sort of generalise, really. I guess there's more. Maybe there's more independent films being made in Europe and the UK. Truly independent, which are wonderful to work on, but it does mean that you've probably got the sort of a much smaller producer team and back-end team, and the money is always going to be much more critical. And so it's that sort of psyche of, no, there isn't an additional pot that you can just go and get something else out of. It is what it is, and you've got to make it work. Where sometimes, I think there's the industry. The industries obviously essentially are the same, but where the financing is coming from is really makes a difference, and also changes as a consequence the potential commerciality of the end result.
Yeah,
and so, I mean, I'm really proud of Europe and what we produce here, because I think creatively there's some absolutely fantastic projects. But I totally sympathise with the producers, because when you look at the commerciality, and these are going to be your filming costs, your production costs, against, you might make this money at the box office if it's a real success, but nobody can guarantee that. It's.
How do you feel the budget impacts the artistic result, the outcome? Is more related to an orchestra or a piano, or an orchestra or software? How does it impact, like, in the production of the music itself?
In terms of what resources that we have? Well, I mean, that obviously very budget driven, and also creatively. I mean, there are plenty of really. There's lots of fabulous scores where there's no live element at all, and it's all produced by the composer and their team and program, and using samples. If it's an orchestral score, I think obviously orchestrally, if it's possible to have some resource for being able to go and record with live players, it makes an enormous difference. It's really strange. As soon as you put one or two live instruments into a mix, which is made up of the world's most wonderful samples, it just adds a layer that brings everything else to life. So, again, it's expectations. I would always hope that going into a project, one's got an idea of whether there is a budget to be able to go into the studio and record. And then the other thing that's very often overlooked is that, a lot of the projects, we are required to deliver at least 5.1, if not 7.1 mixes, or fully surround. But there is a cost implication in that. So not every composer at all has a setup at home. And the other thing is, for the composers, it's a very lonely job being a composer. I don't know if there's any composers in the audience. But normally it's such a good part of the process where the composer has the possibility of going into the studio, recording with live musicians, and then working with an engineer to actually do the final mix, the final finessing. So it's a part of the process that I think sometimes, it's, we'll just do everything back at our own studio. But having someone else's viewpoint can be really, really valuable.
And when it comes, for instance, to, you mentioned technology and how it changed during the last 20 years, 30 years, and nowadays it's like something that changed a lot your, like, daily work. How it does affect your...
Yes, I mean, I guess the biggest changes are how music... Well, obviously the whole film experience of now being mainly digital, not totally, but mainly digital. The biggest change it's made is that in the film world and the television world, there was a finite moment when you could say a picture was locked, because the negative had to go off to the lab, and they needed something like 6 or 8 weeks to produce the prints that would then be distributed all over the world. It sounds extraordinary now, even just saying any of that, but but that is, a locked picture was exactly that. There is no such thing as a locked picture now until you've got a final dub and you see it on air, or in the cinema, but that's put much more strain on the music at the back end, because there's a feeling that, well, it can all be changed right up till the last moment. Whereas before there was a locked picture, the composer then knew that was the locked picture. We knew that for timings, for any source music we were licensing, etc. And now because things are still really fluid all through that period, we do use the tech side to just make that even a possibility a lot. So, music editors can be lifesavers on for a dub where the visual effects have come back, but funnily enough, they're 3 frames longer than they said they were going to be. And somebody thought, 3 frames doesn't matter. But of course it matters to every single other music cue that's coming up after you in that reel, and things like that, where the tech side has created its own problems, but it's brought, I think, quite a lot more stress into it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the other big change is I was very fortunate to work with Stanley Myers, who wrote the music for The Deer Hunter. Absolutely beautiful scores. And
Sorry.
But, Stanley would, when he was working on a film, he would, or a commercial, I did loads of commercials with him as well, and he would literally have the director into his sitting room where his piano was. He'd play exactly what the melody was going to be, and then he'd say, so in this scene I'm going to put the melody on flutes, and on this scene it'll be in the strings will be playing it, and this will be full orchestra at this point. But there was no sort of finite demo using samples done.
Wow.
Now, obviously, as you probably all know, you virtually don't go into the studio unless you've demoed every single cue, and it's been demoed to an extraordinarily high standard. So, in the early days, when the samples weren't very good, that was kind of the middle. That was this whole thing building up. But yes, that's a string sound, or yes, that's clarinet. It's not very nice sound, but that'll be clarinet. But you were still putting a demo to the whole scene. Now the sophistication of the demos is just mind-boggling.
Right?
Yeah.
And what about? I know that technology changed, but also audiences changed, right? The way they approach films and music in general. So they are not that patient anymore. So
no,
that affects your selection of music.
Yes, to a certain extent. I think it's always, for me, very important that we're serving the film all the time. And obviously part of the director's vision is the vision he has for the audience. So you kind of need to try and make sure that all sort of joins up. But yes, who's singing the end titles becomes a key question. Is it a cover version of a really well-known song? When's the artist going to record it? Are you going to have to drop it in after everything else has been finished? I mean, and also it's interesting. 15 years ago, soundtracks were really in terms of driving the record sales, were massively important, and maybe 20 years ago as well. Just where you got compilations was a major thing for a record company, where they had a number of their masters on that soundtrack, which was essentially a compilation of a number of different artists. With streaming, that's not quite the same these days, but the importance of an artist, being the person performing an end title, and they're the right person for the key age group that the film is trying to get to, and it's going to, start a social media buzz. So Taylor Swift doing the end titles for Toy Story, which was announced earlier this week on social media by Taylor Swift. I mean, all of that is, carefully calculated.
Of course.
and she's an amazing artist, absolutely fantastic. And, what's so interesting about that choice is that she appeals to every single age group that will have known all of the Toy Story films. So, the mums and dads, Taylor Swift appeals to them, but then they knew the original Toy Story and, the fantastic versions of the songs that were on those. So it's, it's fascinating seeing how the marketing side comes into some of those choices.
Every day is different, and every day is more important,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I would love you to have some conversation with the audience too. I don't know if someone has any. Yes, there's a microphone somewhere, right or not? They asked me before.
It used to be, but moderating. Hi, Maggie, thank you so much.
Come here. So.
Thank you so much for moderating this amazing panel. I'd like to ask you, how do you discover composers, or how do they approach you? How do you find them?
People approach us every day, and how do we discover them? We do listen a lot to music that gets sent in, but it does, when we have very often met composers because we've worked with them in association with maybe an orchestrator that we know, or an engineer who sort of points people out to us, or we've met them and they've sent us music that we thought was very appropriate for a specific brief that we were looking for at the time. It is really tough, and I apologise because, to be honest, there just aren't enough music agents to be serving the business, which I regret, because the stronger the negotiation is for the composer by people who know what they're doing as composer agents, actually only strengthens our business, but also gives more opportunities for people as well. And I'm always a very big believer in that being strong in your own home market is also a way that people very often get noticed. Is how Alexander Desplat was noticed, because he'd scored something like 60 films in France before he was known outside. So being, doing really great work in your home country is definitely a really great way of getting noticed. But also, not contacting people like us and pointing out, I'm the composer of this film that has just won Cannes, or sometimes just helping bring things to our attention can be really helpful.
Thank you very much.
Hi there. Fantastic talk, Maggie.
Oh.
Wonderful. I'm Martin Sutton from Very Syncable.
Oh, right.
I'm a producer as well as
Yep.
a songwriter. As an ex-engineer, do you find yourself, when you listen to music now, do you find yourself listening to those little nuances of, like, man, if they'd just taken out that little bump at 400, these little EQ things, has that stayed with you?
I don't fixate over it, definitely. If I'm in the studio with a composer, then I will always, if I hear something that I think maybe is something that it would be good to bring up, I will say it, absolutely. For me, the great thing about having been an engineer is knowing how to listen, just keeping the ears fresh, and also being open to new approaches to things. But also, although the technology has changed, the delivery of the mix has changed, it's essentially the same. Understanding the food chain of making music is the same. And to me, that's what I find so valuable, is understanding that food chain. And I am very lucky to work with some of the most fantastic engineers in the business. And so I might not be quite so specific, but I might say, oh, that's got a bit of an edge, which doesn't feel comfortable, or something like that. But I don't think you can unlearn something like that. I think you just have to apply it in a slightly different way.
Hi. We have a microphone now. Thank you so much, Maggie, for all the information you shared. being an independent film producer myself and running my own film production here in Barcelona, I have a question, especially with your background in the space of time. Have you seen any changes in pricing of licensing and for the future? Because we work with very local composers and on a small scheme, because the scale of licensing is sometimes, sorry, but out of anyone's mind, coming from like independent cinema at heart, you know? So do you have any forecast on better licensing deals in the future?
It is to a certain extent supply and demand as well. And I think the big thing that has changed is that, you know, licensing songs has become much more of the filmmaking narrative than it was in the sort of 40 years ago. So, you know, 40 years ago, obviously there were songs in films and there were musicals, but there wasn't such the high density of licensing music to help tell the story of the film, as third-party licensing, I mean. At least that's my thought. And I think with that, obviously, you know, for all the rights holders, sync is now such an important part of their income, and for the artist as well, because other aspects of the record and publishing venues, income streams have changed so much. Those have changed. So, you know, it's a question of, well, how does it add up for an artist to be, you know, writing music and making a living, and some of the income streams that were there before, like, you know, mechanicals on hundreds and thousands of physical albums, that's no longer. The mechanical, I know it exists, but the income stream doesn't exist in the same way. So I think, you know, I think with any licensing, it's a discussion with the relevant rights holder, giving as much information as is possible about the project, being very open about the budget, yes, it's always a discussion. Always a discussion.
We have time for one more.
And the microphone is here, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Hi, Maggie.
Two more.
Thank you for your talk. I made a big pivot in my career, and I stepped into the music supervision journey very recently.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you if you could give me some advices how to build a career.
Oh.
Nowadays, how to be a great music supervisor, and what steps should I take?
I think there's several paths. I mean, keeping your mind musically open to listening to all genres of music across all ages, really sort of, it's just building awareness of the music more than necessarily, you know, being able to instantly name a track. It's more just being that open to different styles of music. I think watching as many films as possible, but then sort of analysing what did the music do, what was the music that caught your attention in a good way or a bad way. How did it sit with the score, so that you sort of, it's almost like setting yourself sort of tasks.
Yes, so this is what I've been doing for all of my life, to be honest. But now
But you are
how
too young.
can how can I apply these skills? So where should I go? How?
Well, I mean, ideally, work alongside an experienced music supervisor, or within an organisation that has good experience. But there is a lot, I think, to take in. The negotiation is one side of it, the creative side is another, but being able to be a fly on the wall and see how someone else deals with a situation is really, really valuable. And do there are lots of good YouTube videos now about interviews with different people from the business. The Guild of Music Supervisors also has a number of videos which are talks about individual things like recording, doing music for on-set playback, or music clearance, that sort of thing. It's really give yourself an opportunity, ideally, to try and see if you can be someone's assistant to see how they handle something, or working alongside somebody with experience is an ideal situation. I know that's not always easy, and the one thing I would say is that as a community, the music supervisors are all very friendly, and there's a great, if you've got a question, ask someone. Don't try and struggle through, and it's sort of phone a friend, as they say.
Last one, yeah.
Hi, my name is Matthias. I'm a sync agent and also a music supervisor. My question is, how do you go on about with? You've talked a lot about working with composers. In my experience, a lot of directors have a real close relationship with certain composers. So how do you go on about to try to convince a certain director of working with, they come up with some different names of the ones that you want to use or they're used to using, and the same goes with commercial music, right? In my experience, the creative part doesn't always feel as much as I would want to. Most of the time it's more of a clearance, a job, which is nice as well, and I find it funny as well. But obviously I would love to do some more creative work. But often the director has a very conceptualized view on their creative view on their work. So how do you go on about and trying to get that?
It's really tough.
Yeah.
There isn't a very simple answer. Where those strong relationships exist, the director and producers, as the director and composer, have very often built up a shorthand in understanding what each other mean. And I think those relationships are super valuable. There aren't hundreds of them, and where they are, I just think helping maintain those. And that in itself sometimes can be a challenge, where you have a film company that wants to input their idea and it's different from what the director wanted to do. But otherwise, the key thing is being able to present to a director some composer choices where the music that you're asking them to listen to is on brief for what you believe that they're looking for. Unfortunately, a lot of decisions are driven by credits, and I find that very frustrating, because on one hand, a film company or a head of music somewhere says, "Oh, we want to work with new people." So you've put together some great reels of people who are up and coming that you absolutely know will fully deliver and will completely get the brief, and then they go, "Oh, but I don't recognise any of the credits." That's why. That's the whole point. But I think, and we've seen various trends. It happens, but we've gone also through a trend of directors wanting to work with artists, and obviously some artists really get film music and TV and understand how to write for a scene. Other artists, it inevitably ends up by being a co-write, and actually putting together those relationships can also be fun and very rewarding too, where sort of the artist's flair comes out in the finished product, but the composer who actually really understood the drama and the narrative that was required was able to put that into the scene. So, but in sort of the cold approach, it has to be a really good reel, and maybe it depends on the film or the subject of the film. If a composer has a real sense of why they want to do that film, that can be very informative for the director. So saying, maybe it's a book that they read when they were 10 years old and this always meant so much to them. It sounds a little bit sort of pat for me to say that, but those things, it's about people being very passionate about what they're going to do. So therefore, if a director can see that actually this person, I see, this music is sounding great, but actually they really know this author. They've maybe they've read more than one book, or they've seen previous films, but by that author or something. Things like that can sometimes make a difference.
Well, Maggie, thank you very much. I think we are almost ready for the next one.
Okay.
But it was a pleasure. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.